the most challenging. You had asked what age groups I had taught. And so then staying over there and getting that job teaching afforded me the opportunity to save a little money. And I still had some from when I left San Francisco. And that afforded me the opportunity to travel. And my mother, by buying what they call a Eurail pass, she could get it really cheap over there. And it's an unlimited train pass for like 2 months. It's different now. But it was really, really cheap. And you go all over Europe on first-class trains. And that made a difference. The first class, second class, third class, it made a difference. And you could actually, they had little doors where you can close in, you have a little compartment. And I used those to sleep as I was traveling on my budget. And I would use the train to sleep at night and get to a city in the morning and I'd be ready to go, and I'd go shave in the restroom and wash my face and so on, and then find the next hostel, you know. So I traveled all the way up from Barcelona now, leaving Costa Brava, and then I went into that's the Spanish Riviera, and then I went up into the French Riviera, following the coast all the way along, and then to the parts of the Italian Riviera, and then I went to Rome, and then I staying at places staying in major cities for some days, and 3 or 4 days here, 3 or 4 days there, and then went down to Italy, to the bottom of the boot, and crossed over into Greece. It's all a few islands, and went into Athens. And then I came back, and on my Eurail pass, took me all the way up to France, where I got an American ship back to the U.S. And so I get back to the U.S. in September, early September, and I head back to SF State with this new enthusiasm for Spanish. And so I met with the dean of the language school at SF State. And he said, I want you to come to my office and we'll chat. And he was very influential. He was the head of Foreign Language Association, Northern California. Very influential, prestigious teacher. And so we chatted for a couple hours. We went and ended up having coffee, and he said, Jimmy, I'll tell you what, he said, you would be bored I could tell by just talking to you, you'd be bored in undergraduate courses. He said, what about I start you in graduate courses? And I said, you think I can handle it? He said, I will handpick your classes for you. And he said, and I will take you under my wing, and I will help you get a job when you're done. So I did an extra year that I hadn't intended, but it was worth it, because it's Spanish opened up all of the doors for me. And my friends in physical education, they were struggling. They had to go out to different areas, and maybe not their first choice and so on. I could go virtually to anywhere I wanted, because at that time, Spanish teachers were in extremely high demand. So I had a skill that everybody needed. And so it opened up a lot of doors. And this Dr. Presta, my advisor, gave me a glowing recommendation. And he was very instrumental in getting my, first of all, back up while I was going to school. He had me do an internship with elementary students in San Francisco. And so I did that. So I got my feet wet with elementary. And then in my first job that he was instrumental in helping me find was in Menlo Park. So I taught at it's called the Las Lomitas School District in Sharon Heights, very near Stanford. And so I taught there for 2 years. And but at the end of 2 years, how should I say it? The junior high age was not for me.
Oh, okay.
You know,
understandable.
Understandable. A lot
Tough group.
and I have friends who've taught junior high their whole life. My brother's son, my brother Vince's son, he teaches it and he's good at it, and he's been doing it for years. And I said, Kenny, you deserve a special medal when you go to heaven. God's going to have a special place for junior high teachers. And so I had contacts in Spain, and I had a family to live with. So I resigned my junior high job, and I went back and studied Spanish at university again, and then I took and I taught English at a different school.
Okay.
And
were you living with the same family though?
And I went back with the same family, and yeah, I mean they were very sweet people, and the mother of the house, she was very sweet, dear, very emotional. And she went to see me off on the boat. And tears were rolling down her eyes, and she couldn't talk. I said, what's the matter, Nati? And she said, ya no nos vemos. I'm not going to see you anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I said, I have a feeling we'll see each other again.
Aww.
And when I came back, I sailed again from New York, took a train across the country, took a Italian boat right into Barcelona. And I can remember the look on her face. And
Was she
said,
crying again?
she was sobbing, and she said, I never thought I would see this day. And we really had a close, tight relationship. And I said, I told you I'd be back. And she said, you know, Jimmy, I didn't believe you. And she said, but you know what? I'll always wait for you now.
Aww.
Whenever you leave, I'll wait for you. And aquí te espero. And you know Spanish?
Un poquito, sí.
Un poquito. And so I came back, and they were delighted to have me. And, you know, I only paid for room and board and cleaning and so on, but they invited me most of the time to their Sunday dinner. Was a big, they had cousins and sometimes relatives and sometimes just them. And they would never charge me extra. But, you know, I'd give them a little extra with my rent. When I went back the second time, remember I told you it was $27 the first time? When I came back, they apologized. And it was something like $30.
Oh.
and they apologize. $30 a month. And
Like, no, I can afford it.
so, in pesetas, I'd always round it up $3 or $4 or $10 or whatever it was. And so they appreciated it, And so I just had wonderful times, and they helped me a lot. They helped me with my homework, and they helped me a lot about understanding the culture.
Yeah.
And they were curious about my culture, to know how we did in these situations, and our customs, our mores, and holidays, and how we celebrated them. And we had certain holidays that they don't celebrate, and they have some that, and we used to compare, and I just learned a lot about the culture. And so I went back, and while I was in summer school before I went over, I was now starting to work on a counseling credential, because I was following my brother. He started out as a teacher. I started out as a teacher, and then he went into counseling, and he was my guide, and he helped me handpick my teachers, and he just guided me all the way. And so I decided to go to the high school level. He had taught junior high, and he went to the high school level. Jimmy went to junior high, and I went to high school level. He went into counseling. He ended up being the dean of counseling at Diablo Valley College. It's a community college in the East Bay, and very well known, very highly decorated, and he was just, just well liked, and he was very competent in what he did, and so I kept following his footsteps, and so I'm at the high school level, and while I was working on my counseling credential, and he was helping me pick my teachers and this and everything, and I found that as I went along into the higher I went, the easier it became. I got to learn how to be a more skillful student.
Yeah.
And the master's degree, to me, of all of them, was a piece of cake. I learned how to skillfully be a student, and how to write, and how to speak, and what it takes to be a good student. And so I finished my master's degree at SF State as I was going. I taught down the peninsula from SF State, about 40 minutes from school. So, and then I did 4 years at the high school level teaching Spanish, and I loved it, but it did get a little bit repetitive.
Yeah.
And doing the same thing day in, day out, year in, year out, and I was looking for a new challenge, and that was counseling. And so I went to counseling at the community college, and I applied at the high school district where I was, but they had no openings.
Oh, okay.
But there was few openings in community college districts, and I had the perfect skills. I taught Spanish, I could speak Spanish,
Right.
and by this time they're looking for Spanish-speaking counselors.
Perfect.
And again, I had a skill that everybody wanted, and so that opened up doors for me. And I would have to interview with teachers in the language department with students, Spanish-speaking students. And so I was able to get through that by what I had learned, and how I was guided and so on. So I was very fortunate. I taught in wonderful places in a wonderful high school district with very, upper socioeconomic areas and a lot of support from parents and just good schools. And then I fell into it. I started working at a brand new community college in Redwood City. I know a lot of these names don't mean many.
I recognize them, though.
Huh?
Yeah, I recognize them, yeah.
Yeah, they're up and down the peninsula.
Yeah.
And that was a brand new district, and I got hired there. And so I was very fortunate, although it wasn't, I lasted 3 years there.
Okay.
I say lasted because it was a little challenging. I was assigned as a minority counselor because of my ability to speak Spanish
Right.
and speak to Mexican American students and so on. And so in that job, it was quite a militant time. If you've read anything about the late 60s,
Yeah.
there was kind of upheaval in education, and students had the philosophy of what we're going to do is we're going to march on the administration and tell them what we want.
And you were
Not
part of that
ask.
administration.
Tell.
Yeah.
That's not the way I was trained or I was brought up.
Right.
You don't demand things from people.
Right.
You negotiate. And then they would come with a list of non-negotiable demands to the administration.
Wow.
And Jimmy would be absent the day that they presented those demands to the administration. I was conveniently ill. I had an ethics sickness.
Yes.
And so I used to duck out on a lot of things because I wouldn't be militant.
Right.
And it came to a point where I was asked to do things that weren't very ethical.
Oh, really? Like what?
And, there was kind of pressure put on me.
By
And
the
I-
students or the administration?
Both.
Oh, okay.
And students who were on work study, and I had students who were my assistants. They would
Okay.
get their
Teachers
pay by
assistants,
being
yeah.
assistants, and they'd do filing for me and so on. And then sometimes they wouldn't show up for a week or two, and then they'd want their hours signed. And I said, no, I can't
Yeah.
do that. I just can't. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the administrators in that program would want me to sign them.
Oh.
And so I wouldn't sign them. So they'd end up signing them for me. And sometimes the student would come to me in a counseling situation. The student was brought up in a lower socioeconomic. They weren't very good at reading and writing. And my philosophy is you start them from the beginning
Right.
and you bring them along slowly. Developmental reading, developmental writing, and so on. And the administration that I was working under said, our students have been pushed back. We want them into the sciences and so on. And when I programmed them, I'd put them into developmental English, developmental writing, counseling and guidance courses, and so on. And then they'd go to another administrator and they'd out on some classes, biology. And I knew the student couldn't handle biology.
Right.
You got to learn to walk before you can
Right.
run. and they were at the walking stage. And so I'd get called in, and by the upper administration, the head of counseling, why are you signing this program? I said, that's not my signature.
Right.
I said, it kind of looks like yours. I said, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I said I wouldn't program it. Why are you putting this student in biology and he's at the lowest level of reading? I said, I didn't.
So you're getting in trouble for things
I
you
said,
weren't even doing.
yeah, and very uncomfortable. So that
Mm-hmm.
I toughed it out for 3 years, and
Yeah.
then I started looking around.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God for SF State.
Mm-hmm.
I always kept in touch with their placement office.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to the placement office, and I said, I'm looking around for another job. And said, well, I said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a college or a community college. He said, you're already there. And I said, yeah, but there's some issues.
Right.
And I said, there's some ethical things that I didn't go into much detail that I'm asking to do, and I couldn't do it, so I want to go to some place where I can feel more comfortable. And so they start sending me, after interviewing me, they started sending me to places I thought that I would fit.
Okay.
And so they ended up, there are some openings for Spanish-speaking counselor at De Anza College in Cupertino.
Yeah.
And my wife and I lived in Cupertino at the
Oh,
time.
perfect.
And we lived, as a matter of fact, across the street from the college.
Oh.
And I used to go to that college at nights and summers and so on. I said, I'd love to work here. And never dreaming that I would end up there.
Right.
And I end up getting getting a full-time counseling job at De Anza, and it was a dream come true. And it was a very comfortable job. I was very comfortable in it, and had a wonderful career there. And I told my wife when I was at that college for maybe a week, I said, you know what? I said, I think I found my last job. And she said, oh, administrators, counselors, administrators, teachers, they change all the time. I said, I don't think I'll ever find it. I just had a wonderful feeling about the faculty, the staff, the student, the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was only 5 years old when I went there, 4 or 5 years old.
And how old were you at this point?
I think I was 36,
Okay.
And so best move and I was right. It was my last job. And I said, I don't think I could find anything any better. And then along the way, we contemplating moving out more rural area because Santa Clara Valley was getting very, very crowded. And but I resisted, and she went along with it. So I ended up staying there the full till.